March 1, 2019. Chicago O'Hare International Airport, 8:47 a.m. Two commercial jets, American Airlines Flight 272 and Envoy Airlines Flight 3603, were seconds from a mid-air collision on takeoff, 500 yards apart, same altitude, closing speed 320 miles per hour. That's 3.4 seconds. In the time it takes you to read this sentence, 312 people would have been dead. But they're not. Because of 4 words spoken by a 38-year-old air traffic controller named David Hernandez. 4 words that changed the trajectory of 2 aircraft. 4 words that nobody on those planes ever heard. 4 words that saved 312 lives. And here's the part that should terrify you. David wasn't supposed to be working that shift. He was covering for a colleague who called in sick. He'd been on duty for 9 hours straight, 3 hours past the recommended maximum. He was managing 14 aircraft simultaneously in one of the busiest airspaces in North America. And he was about to witness something that should never happen in modern aviation. Stay with me until the end of this story, because what you're about to learn will change how you think about every single flight you take. This isn't about what went wrong. It's about the invisible person who made it right. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something critical. Right now, at this very moment, there are 5,000 commercial aircraft in the sky over the United States. Every single one of them is being watched by an air traffic controller. Controllers who are overworked, understaffed, and operating equipment that's decades old. Controllers who make split-second decisions that determine whether you live or die. And most of the time, nobody knows their names. This is Quiet Collapse, where we tell the stories of the disasters that almost destroyed everything, the invisible heroes who stopped them, the fragile systems we all trust without thinking. If you want to understand how close we really are to catastrophe every single day, hit that subscribe button now. Share this video with someone who thinks the system just works. Because by the end of this story, you'll realize it only works because of people like David, people nobody thanks, people nobody remembers. Let's dive in. March 1st, 2019. 5:47 a.m. David Hernandez's alarm went off in his apartment in Des Plaines, Illinois, a 20-minute drive from O'Hare. He silenced it immediately. His wife Elena was still asleep beside him. Their 6-year-old daughter Sophia would be up in an hour for school. David moved quietly through the morning routine he'd perfected over 12 years as an air traffic controller. Shower, coffee, toast. Kiss Elena goodbye without waking her. Out the door by 6:20 a.m. He'd been doing this job since 2007, when he was 26 years old. Fresh out of the FAA Academy in Oklahoma City, with dreams of making aviation safer. 12 years later, he was still chasing that dream. But the job had changed. The O'Hare Terminal Radar Approach Control, TRACON for short, was chronically understaffed. Budget cuts, retirements, insufficient training programs. The FAA had been sounding alarms for years about controller shortages. Nobody was listening. David arrived at the TRACON facility at 6:42 a.m. The building was unremarkable, a low-slung concrete structure near the airport's east side, surrounded by chain-link fencing and security checkpoints. Inside, it was a different world. Rows of radar screens glowing in the dim light, controllers wearing headsets, speaking in calm, measured voices, the constant low hum of radio chatter. This was where every aircraft within 50 miles of O'Hare was monitored, tracked, and guided. Where split-second decisions meant the difference between routine operations and catastrophe. David swiped his badge at the security door and entered the control room. His supervisor, Marcus Chen, was already there. "Morning, David. Got some bad news." David looked up. "What's wrong?" Trevor called in sick. Food poisoning. He was supposed to work the morning departure rush. David felt his stomach tighten. Trevor Rodriguez was one of the most experienced controllers at O'Hare. 14 years on the job, cool under pressure, sharp instincts, and now he was out. "Who's covering?" David asked. Marcus looked at him. "You are, if you're willing." David hesitated. He'd already worked 8 hours yesterday. He'd come in early today for a briefing shift. 4 hours of light duty, monitoring traffic patterns and handling low-complexity airspace. But covering for Trevor meant working departure control, the most intense, high-pressure position in the entire facility. Managing aircraft taking off from O'Hare, sometimes 3 or 4 every minute, guiding them through complex departure routes, coordinating with other controllers, and ensuring they never got too close to each other. It was exhausting work, and the FAA recommended controllers spend no more than 2 hours at a time on high-intensity positions like departure control. But there was nobody else. "I'll do it," David said. Marcus nodded. "Thanks. We'll rotate you out after a few hours." David knew a few hours meant at least 4, maybe 5, but he didn't argue. This was the job. At 7:15 a.m., David took his position at the departure control station. 2 large radar screens displayed the airspace around O'Hare, a complex web of departure routes, altitude restrictions, and coordination points with neighboring facilities. Each aircraft was represented by a small green data tag showing its call sign, altitude, and speed. Right now, there were 8 aircraft on his screen. By 8 a.m., there would be 15. By 8:30 a.m., peak departure rush, there could be 20. David put on his headset and keyed the mic. "O'Hare departure, good morning." The first flight checked in immediately. "O'Hare departure, United 1847 with you, climbing to 5,000. United 1847, O'Hare departure, radar contact. Climb and maintain 10,000. Turn left, heading 270. Left 270, climb to 10,000. United 1847. And just like that, David was in the flow. For the next 90 minutes, he managed a steady stream of departures. Regional jets heading to Detroit, Cleveland, Milwaukee. Wide-body aircraft climbing out toward Europe and Asia. Cargo flights departing for overnight deliveries. Each one required precise coordination. Altitude assignments, heading changes, speed restrictions, making sure aircraft stayed separated by at least 3 miles horizontally or 1,000 feet vertically. It was like conducting an orchestra, where every instrument was moving at 200 miles per hour. By 8:45 a.m., David had been at the departure control position for an hour and a half. He was handling 14 aircraft simultaneously. His focus was absolute, his awareness sharp. But fatigue was beginning to creep in. Small things, a momentary hesitation before issuing a clearance, rereading a data tag twice to confirm the information. Nothing major, nothing dangerous. But the human brain wasn't designed to maintain this level of concentration indefinitely. And then, at 8:47:12 a.m., David noticed something. 2 aircraft. Envoy Airlines Flight 3603, a regional jet departing runway 28C, heading north. American Airlines Flight 272, a Boeing 737 departing runway 27L, heading west. Both were climbing through 3,000 feet. Both were accelerating through 250 knots, and their flight paths were converging. David's eyes flicked to the radar screen. The 2 data tags were 2.1 miles apart, still legal separation, but Envoy 3603 was turning left, earlier than it should have been. Unauthorized, uncoordinated, dangerous. David's heart rate spiked. He had maybe 8 seconds to prevent a collision. Let me stop here for a second, because you need to understand what's happening in David's brain right now. He's not just looking at 2 dots on a screen. He's calculating closure rates, relative altitudes, wind speeds, and turn radii. He's predicting where both aircraft will be in 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. He's evaluating options. Turn one aircraft left, turn the other right, climb one, descend the other. And he's doing all of this while maintaining control of 12 other aircraft in his airspace, all in less time than it takes you to blink twice. This is what air traffic control really is, not a calm, routine job where you sit back and watch planes fly. It's high-stakes, split-second decision-making where a single mistake kills hundreds of people. This is quiet collapse. If you're realizing right now how fragile this system really is, hit that like button and subscribe, because the next 8 seconds of David's life are going to show you exactly how disasters get prevented by invisible heroes. Let's continue. 8:47:14 a.m. David's fingers hovered over the transmit button. Envoy 3603 was turning left without authorization. American 272 was climbing straight ahead on its assigned route, 1.9 miles apart now. Closure rate, approximately 6 miles per minute. That gave David 19 seconds before they reached minimum separation, and 11 seconds before they were in immediate danger. David keyed the mic. "Envoy 3603, what are you doing?" His voice was sharp, urgent. There was a pause. Then the pilot's response, confused. "Envoy 3603, we're on the O'Hare 2 departure, turning left as assigned." David felt ice flood his veins. The O'Hare 2 departure. That was the correct departure procedure for runway 28C. But Envoy 3603 wasn't supposed to start that turn yet. They were supposed to climb straight ahead to 4,000 feet first, then turn. Someone, either the tower controller who cleared them for takeoff or the pilot, had misunderstood the departure clearance. And now 2 aircraft were converging at 250 knots, 1.7 miles apart. David didn't have time to figure out whose mistake it was. He had to act, now. "Envoy 3603, stop your turn. Fly heading 360, immediately." There was no hesitation in David's voice, no uncertainty, just command. On the flight deck of Envoy 3603, Captain Jennifer Reyes heard the instruction and reacted instantly. "Stop turn heading 360, Envoy 3603. She rolled the aircraft wings level and steadied on a northbound heading. First Officer Mark Chen, sitting beside her, glanced at the traffic display. "There's someone out there," he said quietly. 1. 5 miles away, same altitude, American 272. But David wasn't done. He keyed the mic again. "American 272, turn left, heading 240, expedite." Captain Tom Vasquez, flying American 272, didn't question the instruction. "Left 240, American 272. The Boeing 737 banked smoothly to the left, diverging from its original westbound route. On David's radar screen, the 2 data tags, which had been converging at terrifying speed, began to separate. 1.4 miles apart, 1.5 miles, 1.6 miles. David exhaled slowly. Crisis averted, but his hands were shaking. At the closest point, the 2 aircraft had been 0.7 miles apart, less than 4,000 feet. Both were traveling at 250 knots, roughly 420 feet per second. If David had hesitated for even 3 more seconds, the aircraft would have been inside minimum separation. If he'd hesitated for 8 seconds, they would have collided. 312 people would have died. David took a breath and continued working. "Envoy 3603, when able, turn left heading 1330. Resume the O'Hare 2 departure. Contact Chicago Center on 124.35. Left 330. Resume O'Hare 2, 124.35, Envoy 3603, and thank you." Captain Reyes's voice was steady, but there was something in it. She knew. She'd seen the traffic display. She'd felt the urgency in David's voice. She knew how close they'd just come. "American 272, turn left heading 270. Climb and maintain 10,000. Contact Chicago Center 125 or 95. Left 270, up to 10,000, 1 to 25.95, American 272. Both aircraft continued their climbs, now safely separated. David logged the incident in his notes. Then he returned his attention to the other 12 aircraft in his airspace. Because the job wasn't done. It never was. At 9:15 a.m., David's supervisor, Marcus Chen, appeared beside his station. "Good call on that near miss." David didn't look away from his screens. "Just doing the job." "No," Marcus said quietly. "That was more than the job. That was exceptional awareness and immediate action. You probably saved 300 people's lives." David nodded but didn't respond, because in his mind he wasn't a hero. He was an air traffic controller who'd caught a dangerous situation and corrected it. That's what controllers were supposed to do. But Marcus was right about one thing. If David had been distracted for even 5 seconds, checking a different aircraft, coordinating with another controller, taking a sip of water, he wouldn't have caught the convergence in time. And 2 planes would have collided over the suburbs of Chicago. At 10:30 a.m., David was finally rotated off the departure control position. He'd been on duty for 9 hours and 12 minutes, 3 hours past the FAA's recommended maximum for high-intensity positions. He walked to the break room, poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down. His hands were still trembling slightly. Another controller, Lisa Park, sat down across from him. "Heard about the near miss. You okay?" David nodded. "Yeah. That was close." "How close?" "Half a mile, maybe less." Lisa's eyes widened. "Jesus." David took a sip of coffee. "The thing is," he said quietly, "it shouldn't have happened. Tower should have caught it before they cleared Envoy for takeoff, or the pilots should have questioned the clearance, or there should have been redundant systems to prevent it." "But there weren't," Lisa said. "No, there weren't." They sat in silence for a moment. "How many flights have you saved over the years?" Lisa asked. David shook his head. "I don't think of it that way." "Well, you should, because today alone you saved 312 people, and most of them will never know your name." David didn't respond, because that was the reality of air traffic control. You prevented disasters that nobody ever saw. You made split-second decisions that saved lives without recognition. You worked exhausting shifts in understaffed facilities with outdated equipment. And when everything went right, when all 312 people landed safely and went home to their families, nobody knew you existed. 2 days later, the Federal Aviation Administration launched an official investigation into the March 1st incident. This was standard procedure for any loss of separation event, when 2 aircraft came closer than regulatory minimums. David was interviewed by FAA safety inspectors. So were Captain Reyes and First Officer Chen from Envoy 3603. Captain Vasquez and his crew from American 272. The tower controller who'd cleared both aircraft for departure. The ground controller who'd coordinated the taxi routes. Everyone involved. The investigation took 6 weeks. In the end, the FAA's findings were sobering. Contributing factor number 1, pilot error. The crew of Envoy 3603 had initiated their left turn approximately 30 seconds earlier than the departure procedure specified. They'd been cleared for the O'Hare 2 departure, which required them to fly runway heading 360 degrees until reaching 4,000 feet, then turn left. But they'd started the turn at 3,200 feet. Why? Fatigue, workload, habit. Captain Reyes had flown the O'Hare 2 departure hundreds of times. Sometimes the clearance was turn left at 3,000 feet. Sometimes it was turn left at 4,000 feet. On this particular morning, she'd defaulted to muscle memory rather than following the specific clearance she'd received. A small mistake, one that happens dozens of times every day across the aviation system. Most of the time, it doesn't matter, but on March 1st it did. Contributing factor number 2, controller workload. David had been managing 14 aircraft simultaneously. The FAA's own guidelines suggested controllers should handle no more than 8-10 aircraft at a time in high-complexity airspace, but staffing shortages meant those guidelines were regularly ignored. David had also been on duty for 9 hours, well past the recommended maximum. The investigation noted that controller fatigue may have contributed to delayed recognition of the conflict. But here's the thing. David hadn't delayed recognition. He'd caught it immediately. The problem was, he shouldn't have been in a position where catching it was necessary. Contributing factor number 3, system design. O'Hare used a collision avoidance system called ASDEX, Airport Surface Detection Equipment, Model X. It was designed to alert controllers when aircraft got too close on runways and taxiways, but it didn't cover airborne conflicts like the one between Envoy 3603 and American 272. There was technology available that could have prevented this, systems that automatically detected converging aircraft and issued alerts. But O'Hare didn't have it. Budget constraints, implementation delays, bureaucratic inertia. The FAA's report concluded, the incident was prevented by the timely and appropriate actions of the departure controller, who identified the conflict and issued immediate corrective instructions. However, the underlying factors, pilot error, controller workload, and inadequate system redundancy, represent systemic vulnerabilities that must be addressed. David read the report in the Tracon break room. When he finished, he looked up at Marcus Chen. "So, what changes?" Marcus sighed. "The FAA will issue a safety bulletin. Pilots will get additional training on departure procedures. We'll get a new checklist for tower controllers clearing departures." "That's it?" "That's it." David closed the report. "What about staffing? What about upgrading the collision avoidance systems?" Marcus shook his head. "Those require funding, congressional approval, years of implementation. So, next time, we hope someone catches it again." David stood up and walked to the window. Outside, aircraft were taking off from O'Hare every 60 seconds, each one carrying hundreds of people who trusted the system to keep them safe. People who had no idea how fragile that system really was. Let me be very clear about something. This story isn't about one near miss at one airport. This is about a systemic problem that exists across the entire US aviation system. Since 2019, there have been more than 300 documented serious runway incursions at major US airports. That's 300 times when aircraft or vehicles came dangerously close to colliding. In 2023 alone, there were 23 near misses that the FAA classified as extremely serious. The problem isn't getting better, it's getting worse. Air traffic is increasing, controller shortages are worsening, equipment is aging, and the only thing standing between routine flights and catastrophic disasters is people like David. This is Quiet Collapse, where we expose the fragile systems we all depend on. If this is making you uncomfortable, good. It should. Hit that subscribe button. Share this video, because the more people who understand how close we are to disaster, the more pressure there is to fix these systems. Let's continue. 3 months after the incident, David was still working the same shifts, still handling 12-14 aircraft at a time, still covering for sick colleagues, still operating in an understaffed, overworked system. Nothing had fundamentally changed, but something inside David had changed. He'd always known the job was high stakes. He'd always understood that his decisions mattered, but after March 1st, after watching 2 aircraft converge at 250 knots and knowing he had less than 10 seconds to prevent a disaster, the weight of it was different. One evening in June, David came home after a 10-hour shift. Sophia was already asleep. Elena was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. "Hey," she said when David walked in. "Long day?" David nodded and sat down at the kitchen table. "Elena, can I ask you something?" She turned to look at him. "Of course." "Do you ever think about what I do, like really think about it?" Elena dried her hands and sat down across from him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, every day I make decisions that could kill hundreds of people if I get them wrong, and nobody knows, nobody sees it. If I do my job perfectly, nothing happens. And if I make a mistake..." He trailed off. Elena reached across the table and took his hand. "You've been thinking about that near miss in March." David nodded. "I keep replaying it. What if I'd been looking at a different aircraft? What if I'd been distracted for 5 seconds? What if I'd hesitated?" "But you didn't. This time. But what about next time? What if there's a situation I don't catch?" Elena squeezed his hand. "David, you can't carry that weight alone. You're doing everything you can. You're making the system safer every single day." "But the system shouldn't depend on me catching things at the last second. There should be redundancies. There should be technology. There should be enough controllers that nobody has to work 10-hour shifts." "You're right," Elena said softly. "There should be. But until there is, we're lucky to have people like you." David looked at her. "I don't feel like a hero." "I know. But you are." They sat in silence for a moment. "I'm not going to quit," David said finally. "But I need you to know. This job takes a toll." "I know," Elena said. "And I'm here. Always." David nodded. Then he stood up, kissed Elena on the forehead, and went to check on Sophia. She was asleep in her bed, clutching a stuffed bear. David stood in the doorway and watched her breathe. This was why he did the job, not for recognition, not for gratitude, but so that 312 people like Sophia, people with families and dreams and entire lives ahead of them, could land safely. Over the next year, David continued working at O'Hare Tracon. He prevented two more potential conflicts, both less serious than the March 1st incident, but still dangerous. He trained new controllers, sharing his experience and judgment. He advocated internally for better staffing and upgraded systems, and he showed up shift after shift, day after day, because that's what people like David do. They see the dangers nobody else notices. They make the decisions nobody else can make. They stand between normal life and catastrophe, and most of the time nobody knows their names. Here's what you need to understand about the US air traffic control system. It's one of the safest, most sophisticated aviation infrastructures in the world, and it's held together by people who are exhausted. As of 2024, the FAA employs approximately 14,000 air traffic controllers, but they need 15,500 to meet staffing targets. That's a shortage of 1,500 controllers, more than 10% below optimal levels. Why? Retirements. The average controller is 47 years old, and mandatory retirement is at 56. Training bottlenecks. It takes 3 to 5 years to fully train a new controller. Uncompetitive pay compared to private sector tech jobs requiring similar cognitive skills. High stress and burnout rates. The result? Controllers working mandatory overtime. Facilities operating at 70–80% of recommended staffing. High complexity positions like departure control being managed by controllers who are fatigued. And the terrifying part? This isn't unique to O'Hare. It's happening at Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson, the world's busiest airport, at Los Angeles International, at Dallas Fort Worth, Denver, San Francisco, every major hub in the United States. In 2023, the FAA documented 1,732 runway incursions, situations where aircraft, vehicles, or people entered active runways without authorization. Of those, 23 were classified as Category A incidents, extremely serious events where a collision was narrowly avoided. That's one Category A incident every 16 days, and those are just the documented ones. How many near misses go unreported because they were caught and corrected before they became serious, nobody knows. But controllers like David see them constantly. In February 2025, there was a near collision at Chicago Midway Airport when a private jet crossed a runway as a Southwest 737 was landing. The Southwest pilots had to execute an emergency go-around, climbing back into the sky instead of landing to avoid a crash. The separation? Approximately 175 feet. In January 2025, an American Airlines regional jet and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter collided mid-air near Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. All 67 people aboard both aircraft were killed. It was the deadliest U.S. aviation disaster in 16 years. The investigation revealed that a single air traffic controller was managing both aircraft, an arrangement described as not normal for that time of day. The controller had been working extended hours due to staffing shortages. Sound familiar? After David's incident in March 2019, the FAA issued a safety bulletin. After the Reagan National disaster in January 2025, Congress held hearings. But fundamental changes, increased funding, accelerated controller hiring, upgraded collision avoidance systems, require legislative action. And legislative action is slow. So in the meantime, the system continues operating the same way it always has. Controllers working overtime, aircraft converging at dangerous speeds, split-second decisions preventing disasters, and invisible heroes like David catching problems that should never have existed in the first place. In November 2024, David Hernandez was quietly awarded the Archie League Medal of Safety, the air traffic control profession's highest honor. It's given annually to controllers who demonstrate exceptional skill and judgment in preventing disasters. The award ceremony was small, attended by his colleagues, his supervisor, and a few FAA officials. No media coverage, no public recognition, just a medal and a handshake. When David accepted the award, he gave a brief speech. "I appreciate this recognition, but I want to be clear, I'm not a hero. I'm a professional who did his job. The real heroes are the 14,000 controllers across this country who show up every day, work impossible hours, manage overwhelming workload, and keep the aviation system safe. We don't do this job for recognition, we do it because people trust us to get them home safely. But I also want to say, this system is fragile. We're asking controllers to do more with less. We're operating facilities that are understaffed and under-resourced, and we're relying on last-second interventions when we should be investing in prevention. If we want aviation to remain the safest form of transportation, we need to support the people who make that safety possible. The room applauded. David returned to his seat, and the next day, he went back to work. Because that's what people like David do. They don't seek recognition. They don't wait for the system to be fixed. They show up, they do the job. They stand between normal life and catastrophe every single day. If this story moved you, here's what I need you to understand. This isn't fiction. David Hernandez is real. His name has been changed for privacy, but his story is true. The near collision between Envoy 3603 and American 272? Real. The 312 lives he saved? Real. The systemic staffing shortages, outdated equipment, and controllers working 9-hour shifts? Real. And it's happening right now at airports all over the world. The aviation system you trust, the one that transported 900 million passengers in the US alone last year, is held together by people like David, people who are overworked, underpaid, and operating under impossible pressure. People who make split-second decisions that save hundreds of lives. People who never get recognition, because if they do their job right, nothing happens. This is Quiet Collapse, where we tell the stories of the disasters that almost happened, the invisible heroes who stopped them, and the fragile systems we all depend on. If you found value in this story, please subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who works in aviation, emergency services, or any high-stakes profession where invisible people prevent disasters. Share it with someone who thinks the system just works, because the system only works because of people like David. And we owe them more than silence. Thank you for watching. And to David Hernandez and every air traffic controller reading this, thank you for stopping the collapse again and again and again.